Accelerator is a Pan-African organization that was founded in 2017. We are Africa focused on learning and sharing, a learning and sharing platform. We focus on what strategies, what capacity areas do African advocates need or stakeholders in the advocacy ecosystem need, and how can we support that? So we are issue agnostic. We look at the issues and then we help the advocate and the technical service provider or the donor to identify the area of need and to support that area of need. Our purpose is to ensure that locally driven advocacy is done and through country-based advocacy in Africa. Sorry, let me just take that again. We ensure that locally driven advocacy through country-based advocacy in Africa is effective and has a lasting effect. So it's strategies from Africa to address African issues that have lasting impact. Then our aim is to strengthen local advocacy capacity, increase the effectiveness of advocacy efforts, and to foster greater alignment and collaboration between local actors in the development advocacy ecosystem in Africa. So we provide opportunities that help advocates like you and others in this field to sharpen advocacy skills and campaign strategies and strengthen their capacities to influence and achieve the greatest impact. We work with three critical players, as I've mentioned, in the advocacy ecosystem. We work with advocates, we work with technical assistance providers, and we also work with donors. And we link these three so that we have, they are able to address the issues that are coming out from the field. So that's about AAC. We'll invite Phil to take over the session from here and take us through the learning. Thank you.
Thank you too, Helen. I'd like to invite everyone to share in the chat how confident you are about your digital advocacy skills and knowledge. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is the lowest. So if you're not at all confident, you don't know where to begin, you haven't tried, you're a 1. And if you're extremely confident, extremely powerful online, extremely impactful, maybe you're a 5 or somewhere in between. So I'd like to just ask participants to share in the chat your own self-evaluation about your current digital advocacy skills and knowledge. And as you do that, I'll just give a few notes about my bio. My name is Phil Wilmot. I'm from Pennsylvania, but I've lived in Uganda the past 11 years. I participate in organizing and supporting various movements across Africa, especially youth movements in all regions of Africa. I'm particularly focused in East Africa, where I was the director of an organization called Solidarity Uganda, which is a member-based women and youth network working against authoritarian rule, working against corruption, working against land grabbing and all kinds of oppression, and for the liberation of the people of Uganda. I'm a member of a group called Beautiful Trouble. Helen, if you could share a link to the beautifultrouble.org website in the chat, that would be great. It's got a great toolbox that I'll be referencing in the course of this session that we have together, with a lot of tactics, a lot of artistic and creative tactics for making change. Tactics, stories, principles of struggle, theories of struggle, methodologies for planning, all kinds of very, very exciting and useful tools that can be adapted within your own campaigns and contexts and initiatives. And all of this wisdom in that toolbox is harnessed from around the world. And we just completed a 2.5-year harnessing of wisdom from youth movements across Africa. And you can also go to the store on that same website and find a download of something called New Pan-Africanism, which has over 20 tools from youth activists across Africa that are doing really inspiring and wonderful work. I'm also a member, of course, of Advocacy Accelerator, and I'm also one of the directors at a campaign called Climate Clock. So if you go to climateclock.world, you can learn more about that. It's basically a clock that we're putting up in cities around the world, counting down the time that we have left on our carbon budget. So what do we have in the chat so far, Helen? Do we see some 1s, some 2s? Do we see some 4s, some 5s?
Elsie, please assist with that.
I notice you're not a co-host.
Yeah.
What we can see 4s, we can see 2s, a little confident. We can see the others is just the 4s and mostly are 2s.
Great, thank you. So let's start then with some of the basics that will help out some of you who feel like you're just at that level 2 out of 5. Just a few basics of what we at the Advocacy Accelerator consider to be digital advocacy, and also what we don't consider to be digital advocacy. So really quickly, this is the kind of framework that we're using to go through this session together today. So what is digital advocacy? Digital advocacy is all about campaigning for change online, using digital tools to tell a story that achieves something for the common goal, a common good, or toward a common cause that benefits the public good. It's about shifting popular narratives and discourse, but usually has a goal or a target in mind. It could be policy change. It could be, a change in the private sector. It could be something about shifting cultural norms, but usually there's a goal and a sort of constituency or community or target in mind in regard to that goal. And we don't consider digital advocacy a substitute for other forms of advocacy. We consider it an additional tool. So I know often we hear that, with COVID-19 and police repression and brutality and all the challenges that we face, we should go online. We're very fond of saying that kind of thing. But at Advocacy Accelerator, we think that, it's not that simple. Yeah, you can do a lot online, but you still need other forms of advocacy, which have varying levels of risk, some high risk, some low risk, some things offline, some things online, many things a combination of the two. So we're trying not to think about digital advocacy in a vacuum when it comes to campaigning and making change. So some things that we don't consider to be digital advocacy are, for example, making a single post on social media that doesn't consider who might see that post or who the post is targeting. We don't consider, just liking and sharing things to be digital advocacy. And then we're not going to get time today really to discuss much, unless maybe it comes up in the Q&A, about digital security. I mean, you can spend several weeks learning about the basics of digital security. We won't be doing that in this session. It's just too much to achieve. But those are just a few quick notes to kind of frame our way forward. And so what I would like to do here is just give a few stories, a few case studies to get our minds thinking outside of the box about how people have done digital advocacy across Africa specifically. We'll use a few examples from elsewhere as well. So let's start in a place called Lango. Lango is a region in northern Uganda. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Lango is a region in northern Uganda where a lot of foreign business owners, especially from Asia, have controlled a lot of the value chains for the food industry and other industries as well. But in this particular region, they were buying food directly from farmers, foodstuffs, without having the proper licenses to do business, etc. And farmers locally were really unhappy about what was happening within this particular region. And so they decided that they're going to go on strike and stop doing business with these foreign business owners that were using their political connections to circumvent the proper taxes and protocols and that kind of thing, and driving local people out of business. And so the principle that they kind of exercised here was, let's find people where they're at, right? So we don't all need to jump on social media just because we hear the term digital advocacy. If you're in a region where social media is not the most prominent form of communication and radio is more effective, you might think about radio. In this case, the people of that region went to 3 major radio stations and sent out a communication across 9 districts of that region to say that everybody should stop selling to these particular business people so that they can't do business in our region anymore. And there was a 2-day general strike against the predatory economics of this region. And basically what happened was that the Minister of Trade was forced to come to the ground and negotiate with people, to make sure that the proper business protocols were being observed and that, farmers and small business people were not being preyed upon. So that radio campaign was extremely successful. So sometimes it's about, doing the thing which is tried and true and works because many people are using that particular medium of communication. So another campaign that was highly successful comes from Sudan, where a young girl was accused of, under Sharia law of Sudan, of murdering her husband. Well, she was actually forced into an early marriage against her will, and her husband had raped her, and in the past, and I think he raped her once or twice, and then the third time that he tried, she fought back and defended herself and ended up killing him. She tried to seek refuge with family members, and the family members betrayed her, took her to police, and her life was really under threat of the death penalty. And so local organizations really, really organized to basically protect her life. And they got over 700,000 signatures online that were calling upon the government of Sudan to spare Nora's life. And Africa Youth Movement came in and developed an analysis of Omar al-Bashir because, a lot of people doing petitions were saying, let's get the global community to call upon the government of Sudan. Well, al-Bashir, of course, didn't have, positive diplomacy with much of the world outside of Africa, but he did feel pressured by other leaders within Africa. And so Africa Youth Movement was able to create a more targeted digital campaign to put pressure upon these secondary targets, these heads of state, these members of the AU that could also reach out to al-Bashir. And as all of this campaign was going on, local organizations were doing this jail solidarity. So the digital campaign wasn't in a vacuum, right? As I was sharing earlier. They had local lawyers and other folks, taking great risks to visit Nora and to conduct local campaigns to support her and spare her life. And eventually they were able to do so. She got a few years in prison, but that's much better than, of course, the death penalty. And this also spawned subsequent campaigns, including one that's called No to Women Oppression Initiative. Let's talk about some pretty astute and strategic maneuvers that the Kenyan doctors used just a few years ago when their sector was under threat. The government was not paying doctors well, and the medical workers decided to go on strike. Now, when they first went on strike, many Kenyans across the country did not side with them. And, this is largely because many doctors are privileged people. They have salaries, these are more well-educated members of, the bourgeoisie, so to speak. And basically what the doctors had to do was ask, how are we going to get public support since, a lot of society doesn't really have that solidarity with us at a time when we need to go on strike. So within 2 months of asking that question, they were able to develop a national multi-sector anti-corruption movement. And how were they able to do this? Well, first of all, making that analysis that we do need people out on our side this is not an issue that affects us alone in a vacuum. So how are we going to portray that, through visuals and through hashtags? Well, people may not identify with our lacking a salary, but they do identify with the conditions within hospitals, right? The lack of equipment, the lack of staff, and the sort of poor conditions of our public health sector. And the people in the private clinics also joined them in solidarity once the doctors in the public sector said that, we actually need like this equipment in the hospital. This isn't just about our wages. This is also about working conditions and the equipment that's available to the wounded and sick people of Kenya. So at this point, they started to get a lot of public support because we have all, of course, been in situations where the public health sector has kind of disappointed us when we needed more from it. And the government felt threatened by this public support. And so the government paid bloggers to release a lot of propaganda about the doctors. They were calling the doctors greedy. And so the doctors did a creative thing of actually hijacking the greedy doctors hashtag from the bloggers. And they would post photos like this one, which shows a woman, medical practitioner, doing a surgery while carrying a baby on her back because there were so few people on call who were qualified to do such a surgery. And then they would use the hashtag greedy doctors to show that actually they're not greedy. And actually it's the bloggers who have been paid even more money to release this propaganda than it would take to actually pay the doctors. So they kind of turned that whole rhetoric of greedy doctors on its head in a very sarcastic and satirical and funny way. And they were also able to share many, many stories, and they asked people, they open source their campaign. They asked people share pictures, share posts on social media under this hashtag to show about the conditions at various health facilities across the country. So they were inviting people in. This thing wasn't a campaign centralized in the doctors' union anymore. It was actually a national campaign that tapped into the anger and the sentiments that people feel due to corruption within the health sector. It's a very strategic campaign that actually won them better working conditions, more equipment, and better wages, even as they continue to protest after the strike, which lasts a few months. I'll share a few examples of how digital campaigning has really helped within Uganda, where I am. Many of you know Robert Chagulanyi, Bobby Wine. He's one of the opposition presidential candidates here in Uganda. Before his campaigns began, he knew that the national media, the traditional media, the newspapers, the television stations, he knew that all of these would be censored by the government during the campaign season. So what he did was he took time to build up a number of social media platforms where news could be shared without the regulation of the state. And so this was really helpful. He was able to perform concerts which had tens of thousands of people in attendance during a pandemic, but online. The concert was online and had that many viewers or more. And of course, a lot of the information as it came out about particular protests or what's happening in the country and it's getting censored by the state, they were able to tell the real story of what's happening. Another very creative person from Uganda that uses a really excellent blend of online and offline action is somebody called Stella Nyanzi, Dr. Stella Nyanzi. I really encourage you to do a search online and look up more about Stella Nyanzi if you have not heard of her already. She is an academic, a feminist academic from Makerere University, where she used to work. She studied reproductive health, African sexualities, many topics, and related them to, the political climate of Uganda. She's well known across Africa for a number of things, not the least of which is an action that she did at Makerere's campus, where as she was challenging the older men at the university who were, kind of holding the historical power within the institution and allowing the the academic institution to rot. She stripped naked one day on campus to protest the working conditions that she had been subjected to. And that day she did a one woman action, but it wasn't actually a one woman action because she was streaming it, to the public as well. She was playing to the audience that wasn't there physically, but was there online. So this aspect of, live streaming or posting videos of one person's action can be really creative and inspiring. And she's also known for writing what she calls Facebook poetry. It's very vulgar. It's a critique of the vulgarity of the state and of dictatorship and authoritarianism and corruption and patriarchy. And this Facebook poetry that she has done actually landed her in prison for more than a year. And she was able to, around that same time, kind of shame the First Lady of Uganda, who is also the Minister of Education. Janet Museveni had promised pads to girls to go to school if they were to vote her husband back into power. And after he, staged a coup and seized power, she said, actually, there's no budget for it. And so Stella used her social media platforms to call out the First Lady for that negligence and to actually raise pads for girls. So she was shaming the leaders by doing their jobs for them. Yet the leaders have a whole tax system, extorting from their people to at least provide something simple like sanitary pads. So that was a very powerful campaign that got a lot of people talking about the gender elements and education and corruption and budgeting. And then finally, a very fun, I just want to share this example because there might be, some actors in the room, some performers in the room today. There's an example where some filmmakers and performing artists united with some flower workers and unionists from Uganda. And they developed a short film where, so Uganda has a number of Dutch flower companies that employ local people to base at low wages and harsh conditions to grow flowers that are sold predominantly in Europe. And there were some chemicals in a lot of these greenhouses that were very dangerous to the workers. And the Dutch embassy, the team wrote to them. The Dutch embassy wasn't very responsive, was kind of dismissive. They even said that they really doubted that there were any human rights violations within these greenhouses. So what these performing artists did was go to one of the Dutch diplomats' homes, and they took that chemical. It was really just water, but they took that chemical and sprayed it on video on the gate of this diplomat's home, and said, if this is really not dangerous, then you should have some of it for yourself. And this actually, caused some members at the Dutch embassy to say, we really don't want that video to be released. We'll talk with you. So in other words, sometimes when you start to do an action, it presents a threat to a particular target, and then you have some leverage. It's very hard to go to the negotiation table, to the bargaining table, when you don't have some leverage. So by doing this action, they were able to give themselves leverage. Another famous historical example of this principle, which we call the threat of the thing is usually more terrifying than the thing itself, comes from the person who coined that phrase. He's called Saul Alinsky. He was an organizer in many places, Chicago amongst them. And in Chicago, the international airport was preying upon the local community as it's expanding its airport. And so the local organizers just announced a threat that they are going to stage what's called a shit-in. They are going to sit on the toilet and shit the whole day so that people passing through the airport cannot use the toilets. And so it would shut down the whole airport. And just the announcement of this action was enough to get the airport to say, okay, we're gonna stop, preying upon the local neighborhoods that are the hosts to this airport, and they stopped their predatory development practices. So it's a very, powerful principle. where you actually don't do anything. You just threaten to do something. And of course, today, digital campaigning can help us do such a thing. And the digital terrain is very interesting for a tactic that we call the hoax. What is a hoax? A hoax is basically when you assume the identity of someone that you are not in a bid to secure justice or make a change, to use the political definition of hoax. So it's essentially creating satire, or even some might say fake news, but doing it in a way that achieves something very positive. It's about putting your target, your opponent, in some kind of tricky position. So in this picture, you can see this guy on the right. He's one of the yes men, and the yes men is a duo that goes around and assumes identities of political leaders, politicians, big people within like the UN system. They just pretend to be those people, and they attend conferences, they stage press conferences. So one thing that these guys did was build a website, and that website was basically apologizing for the oil spills that Dow Chemical had made in India. And this was in the 1980s, I believe, that the oil spill happened, but they've never been given any kind of compensation or restitution from the company. And so they built this website basically saying that we are the corporate social responsibility wing of Dow Chemical. And the BBC thought it was a real website. And the BBC called them and said, we would love you to come on the air and tell us what you're going to do to compensate the people in India. And they said, okay, we'll do that. So they went on the air live with the BBC and pledged a multi-billion-dollar fund to compensate the victims and their communities in India. So they're pledging money on behalf of a company that they don't represent. And of course, the jig was up very fast. Of course, people found out that these people don't really represent Dow, but the fact is they had already been live on the BBC, and it's very hard for a chemical company to go on the air and say, these people don't represent us. Actually, we're not going to compensate the victims. So the idea of a hoax is like to create some kind of hype. It gives us kind of an opportunity to see what the world could be, a little glimpse of utopia. There was a great hoax that we witnessed toward the beginning of the pandemic, where a group built a website announcing that on behalf of the International Monetary Fund, that due to the economic stresses of the pandemic, the IMF will cancel debts to 111 countries that are experiencing moderate to high debt stress. So this was a fake website, but they had this little kind of form on their website that said, fill this out and it will email your representatives at the IMF to thank them for their promise to alleviate the debts of these countries that are, many of them African countries that are being exploited by debt servicing. And so, all of these representatives within the IMF were receiving these emails, and there was all this kind of panic. And of course, the journalists had a very fun day asking people at the IMF, is it true? And of course, it wasn't true, but it created that moment of panic, and it created a new conversation within the International Monetary Fund. And it kind of like put the IMF on the spot when they're, kind of manipulating economics in this time when many people are suffering. So that is a hoax. Very, very fun tactic. It's very exciting. It stirs up a lot of hype and attention. So when we're doing offline activism, in the streets, so to speak, there's a principle that we often practice called direct action, which is basically, it's different from your typical protest. It's different from your typical march. A direct action is something where you don't ask permission, where you don't give your power to a representative. You're not trying to persuade anyone. You're just trying to do the thing that you want to do yourself. And one example of a digital direct action is called DDoS. Now, this is very controversial. We're not recommending it, There are illegal ways of doing it. There are legal ways of doing it. What we're trying to do here is to get us to think outside the box about what counts as advocacy and how these different forms of taking power and exercising power fit into a broader ecosystem of digital advocacy. So a distributed denial of service, otherwise known as a DDoS attack, is almost like a sit-in. You know, so if you go and you sit in at a company or at at Parliament, and you don't let the workers leave until you get what you want, a DDoS attack is doing the same thing online. This is what happened when Anonymous attacked the government websites of Sudan and Zimbabwe not too long ago, when their heads of state were administering so much repression upon their people. So it's kind of like a citizen sanction. There was a time when the people of Thailand did this. All they had to do was go to one of the government websites at the same time and organize a bunch of people to keep clicking on the refresh button, refresh, 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 refresh. And by doing that, it overwhelmed the website with traffic. And for a brief moment there, the government website didn't work. So it was a way of kind of citizens exercising their power together online. So just one last thing, and if you've been kind of loosely following up to now, pay attention here, because we're going to be talking about this briefly in breakout groups in just a few minutes. So one of the key principles of digital advocacy is that we're trying to make the invisible visible. We are trying to expose something that is not in the spotlight and put it in the spotlight, right? So for example, with the Black Lives Matter protests, with End SARS in Nigeria, this sort of tactic of filming police brutality and exposing, the wrongs of the state machinery, it kind of, it doesn't only build awareness, but it also mobilizes people, right? It brings that invisible thing that we all know is there, but we're suffering in silence about it, and puts it right in the spotlight. So my question to you is, what ways have you used digital advocacy to make the invisible visible? How have you grabbed an issue which needs to get the spotlight more? How have you done that on social media, online, maybe on Facebook, maybe on Twitter, maybe on TikTok? How have you done that? So we're going to take just a few minutes to have about four people to a room and share some experiences together for the next 10 minutes about how you have done that. And then when we come back, we're going to be looking at some tools that can help us plan digital actions that can make an impact as part of our campaigns. So I'll ask the administrator. I understand that we can do some breakout rooms.
Yes, we can.
To put four people in a room. Great. And we can just discuss that question. Again, the question is, how have you used digital advocacy to make the invisible visible? And if you haven't, that's okay. But maybe you can share about a way that somebody you know has done the same.
Okay. How many minutes are we going out?
10 minutes, please.
Okay. Please check your screens and go ahead and join your rooms. The rooms are now open. Yeah, thanks. Please join your rooms.
So if you haven't joined a breakout room, you should see something on your screen that welcomes you to join a breakout room. Please click to accept that.
Faith, Precious, please join your rooms. Yeah, thanks. And Octavia, Leonardo, join your rooms, please. We only have 10 minutes for discussion. Hosni, also join your room. Check your screen, you'll see you'll get some direction on how to move. Just click it, then you'll join the room.
So the rest of us, are we part of the plan team?
Yeah, the rest are, I think just one more. The rest are the plan team. Just, I can't get to Hosni.
Okay.
No, Faith is not. Faith and Precious also. There are 3 missing, not been able to join.
Okay.
Precious, Babbage, please join room 3. Thanks. And whoever is written plan, please put your name and then your country.
Hi, I am the translator for Egypt.
Oh,
That's
okay.
my plan.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Am I going too fast and too dense for you?
No. It's okay. It's fine.
Ah, okay. Great.
So you need to be in the same room with Hosni or?
Hosni, she's in which group?
Group 1. So can I move you there? But she's
okay,
not
fine.
joined even.
She hadn't joined yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me check.
Okay.
Are you doing okay, Helen? Precious, were you able to join our room? Hi, Precious, can you hear us? Were you able to join our room?
Hi, Elsie. Please take me to the group where Claire was assigned.
Hi, Elsie. I'm the translator from Egypt, Nihal. Could you please get me back to room number 2 because Hadir is in 2. I was in a different room.
Your name, please?
Nihal. I'm Plan. Plan.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Are we about to wind up with our session in the breakout rooms?
I think the 2 minutes are already gone. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think we could bring them back.
Well, I'll wait here then. There's no need to move me back.
Yeah, I think it's better.
Yeah.
Elsie, are you able to bring everyone back?
Yeah, sure, a minute.
Great. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back.
Yes.
I hope you've had a great discussion. I know in some of the rooms, it would have been great to talk longer, but we don't have that convenience today. So I want to invite us all to stretch, to get up from our seats.
Levez-vous de vos places.
I want to invite all of us to get up from our seats and grab something nearby you that symbolizes artistic digital advocacy. And please show us. I've got something nearby me that symbolizes artistic digital advocacy. So please grab something that you see. Feel free to put on your camera if you're able to do that and show us. If you're not able to put on the camera, you can just type it in the chat and tell us what it is you grabbed and how does it symbolize artistic digital advocacy.
Yes, hello. Hello.
Yes, Jacqueline.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you have a question? Right now, what we're doing is grabbing something nearby us that symbolizes artistic digital advocacy. And here's mine.
Yeah, I would like to discuss about that. How can we make invisible things to be visible? And we have I'm a leader of group 3.
Yeah, thank you. We're not going to be reporting. Thank you, Jacqueline. We're not going to be reporting back from our groups. It's going to take us too much time. But if you have something to share from your discussion, please share it in the chat. We would love to read. So welcome back, everybody. Let's get back to our program. Feel free to continue sharing in the chat about the things that you grabbed around you that symbolize artistic digital advocacy. Welcome back to plenary. At this point, we are going to be discussing the action star. And basically, the action star is a tool that helps us determine whether a particular tactic benefits our digital advocacy or our campaign at large. And the Action Star has these 8 points of consideration, and we're going to go one by one through each of them. And there's a little URL link there at the bottom if you're interested in doing more reading after this session about the Action Star. So these are 8 considerations, as I said, that help us plan an action that could be impactful. So when I'm talking about an action, what am I referring to? I'm referring to maybe, content that you put out through social media, the ways in which you're using digital tools to create change, those particular things that you do with the digital tools that you have. And so when you're planning an action, you want to consider a target. What is a target? A target is, somebody, an entity, a person, a group, an institution that you want to act on something. And often an action will have a target because it's trying to get, say, a legislator to pass a law, or say a company to offer remuneration to its workers, say police to arrest somebody who has abused his family. So you're determining, who is this message for? Who is this action for? Who do we want to do something as a result of this action? So there are many, digital advocacy attempts that don't consider who are we talking to, or who are we talking about, and who do we want to do something about what we're saying. So we are advising that you really ask that question as you do your digital campaigning. And then audience is something a little bit different from the target. So the target is the person or group that you're trying to move to do something. And then the audience is like the people who are witnessing this whole exchange. So when you're protesting in the streets, when you're going on a march, let's say that you're trying to get the mayor for your town to do something. So the mayor is the target, but all around you, there are people witnessing what's happening. Oh, did you see those people that were marching? That's your audience. So on the digital terrain, you have the same thing. You also have a target or more than one target, and then you also have an audience or more than one audience. So you want to know more about your followers. For example, if you have a social media account, if your organization or movement is on Facebook, if your union has if the general secretary of your union is always tweeting, you want to know as much as you can about your followers. Where are they from? What ages are they? What kind of gender demographics do they represent? What languages do they speak? Where are they in the world in relation to you? You want to know as much about your audience as you can so that the communications that you design appeal to them. And then your action can consider a point of intervention. So the points of intervention are the places, the where. Where will you do this action? So in the digital terrain, this is what platform are we using? Are we using TikTok, right? Are we using WhatsApp groups, specific WhatsApp groups maybe? Where will this action be done? And traditionally there are 6 kind of categories of points of intervention. The first one is the point of consumption. This is where something is consumed, or for example, where something is purchased or bought. Then there's the point of production, where something is made. So say, for example, a factory. Then there's the point of destruction. This is often, say, the place where there's an oil spill, or the place where a building was burnt down. The point where an opponent, has caused some kind of destruction. Then there is the point of decision. The point of decision is sometimes overused. This is the point where decision makers gather to pass a resolution. This could be a board meeting. It could be a town council meeting. It could be a convening of parliament, a session of parliament. So many protests are held at parliament, and sometimes that's very strategic, but sometimes parliament may not be the best point of intervention for our campaigns. And then we have the point of assumption. So the point of assumption is a bit unique, and it's pretty particular, I think, to digital campaigning, pretty helpful for us to understand. The point of assumption is what is that assumption that we are interrupting? So for example, when Uganda and Zimbabwe were passing laws that were banning miniskirts, there was a lot of propaganda circulated that said miniskirts are for sex workers only. And so there was popular support. So there was popular support for these regressive, laws. And lawyers came out and did some marches. And, they were wearing miniskirts at these marches to intervene at the point of assumption, to say that it's not only sex workers who wear miniskirts. We also like wearing miniskirts, and part of a free society is self-expression. So they were intervening not only wherever they did the march, but also in people's minds and assumptions. And then there's the point of opportunity. This would be like a holiday or a particular time in the calendar, maybe when there's, maybe when the state is convening a big meeting, or there's an annual general meeting for shareholders of a big telecom company, or it's Earth Day, So these are the points, what we call the point of opportunity, when a lot of public attention is on a particular time. So does your action on the digital terrain, has it identified the point of intervention that will be strategic for that particular action? And then we have something here called the spectrum of allies. So does your action shift the spectrum of allies? So in order to answer that, we have to first tell you what the spectrum of allies is. And I encourage you to read more at that URL below after the session. But the spectrum of allies is basically a tool that helps us understand that society exists along a spectrum. So we have those people who really, really agree with us and will do something about it. Those are our active allies. And then we have, let me just use the little annotation thing here so that we can all follow along. So we have us, the active allies, those people that will always help and join your campaign and do something when you call them to action. And then on the opposite side of us, we have our most active opposition. So this would be like the people who completely oppose you. You will never win them to your side. Their interests are categorically opposite from yours. And then we have, of course, people in society that are kind of neutral about the issue that we're campaigning about. They're neither here nor there. They don't really care. Maybe they don't follow social issues or politics, and they feel kind of removed from it. And there's a substantial group of the population that falls in this category. Of course, these are people just trying to get by and survive. They don't necessarily think about their lives as political lives, and so on and so forth. But these are not the only three groups, right? We also have people that sort of agree with us, but they're not going to do much. They might like our Facebook posts. They might even occasionally share something, or retweet something that we posted. But they're not really going to become so active. And then we have also passive opposition. These are not people that necessarily want to hurt us, but they're benefiting from the system, right? And generally, they stand in our way a little bit. And so the idea about the spectrum of allies is that if we are going to shift our society towards supporting our campaign, then we're going to have to pull this whole spectrum a little bit closer to us. So we may never make our passive opposition our most active allies, but we can at least neutralize them, right? We can find tactics that neutralize their negative effects on us. And then people in society that don't really care so much about our issues, we could maybe educate them on why it matters, how it affects their lives, and bring them into that passive ally kind of category. They may not be super active, but at least they'll kind of be on our side, right? And then for the passive allies, maybe we just need to invite them, to do something, to attend a meeting, to help us plan. Maybe we need to ask them to do something as part of our digital campaigns to make them more active. So the question that we're asking here is, does our action bring the spectrum of allies a little bit closer to us? There's a lot to say about this, and we're not going to have enough time to actually go through it all. But please take the time to read more about it. Oh, I've left a lot of writing. So the next piece of the action star to consider is, does my tactic tell a story, right? And here, we're not going to go into this because of lack of time, but you can actually print a worksheet from that URL there about what we call the battle of the story. So, you know, humans think in story. It's part of our psychology, and it has been throughout, you know, basically human civilization. Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? What's the story here? What's the conflict that we're overcoming? And so, you know, if your action speaks to narrative, what we call narrative power, then it's likely to catch on with people. If people can identify who are the characters here, what's the imagery that's being used, what's the conflicts, you know, who are the good guys and bad guys, and what's the dispute between them, and whose side am I on, then you're likely to brew up enough intrigue and controversy to get people really interacting on your digital campaign. And then we want to ask, does this action build our capacity in some way? So when I'm saying capacity, I could be referring to membership. Like, does this action help us recruit, right? So if we're posting something on our social media accounts that says, hey, we're forming a mailing list, like, can you sign up? That's an action that builds our capacity. You know, because then we'll have a list of people's emails that we can always get in touch with. You know, maybe the action builds our knowledge or our skills. Maybe it expands our networks or builds our legitimacy so that we can lobby for more funding for our campaign. So does the action build your capacity is another consideration. And then second to last here is what we call action logic. So we want to be asking here, does the action that we're doing online make any sense to the average person who might see it? If it requires a lot of deep explanation, then probably it can still be refined to be a better tactic or a better communication or better content that we're putting out. If it's something that I can see and I immediately understand it, then that is that's a strong action logic. And then finally, does what we're doing speak to the values that our audience has? Not that you always have to be populist, you know, and appeal to everyone's values. Of course, people have differing values. But, you know, the real question here is, like, are we appealing to the values that we're trying to appeal to through this action? So if we're, you know, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic in Uganda, a lot of women were being beaten in the marketplaces for violating curfew. So as soon as curfew would begin, those who are really hustling for the survival of their families, you know, were being beaten by police, and their tomatoes and fruits were being confiscated, and, you know, they were really being abused. And, you know, when such a picture is circulated on social media that shows, like, armed men abusing, you know, a grandmother who's carrying her produce home, of course, that appeals to the values of many people that are going to be the audience to that image. You know, why should somebody who is armed be beating somebody who's just working hard, right? So, you know, does our action appeal to the values of our audience is another question. And so basically, you know, you're not ever really going to find an action that ideally meets all of these 8 criteria. It's very hard to do that. But, you know, if you're comfortably covering 5 or 6 of them, then probably that particular tactic is going to contribute strongly to your campaign at large. And when I'm using the word campaign, I'm referring to kind of like the protracted effort on a particular cause or issue. And when I'm referring to a tactic, I'm talking about those individual things that you do as a part of that campaign. You know, so this action star can be used to help you assess and plan an action. It can also be used to help you evaluate later. So you can even assign each of these points on the action star, like, you know, a maximum of 3 points, and you can predict that, okay, this action is gonna, you know, probably out of the 24 possible points, like we're expecting 18. And then later on, you can evaluate, well, okay, we thought it would build our capacity, but it didn't really. We got 0 out of 3 there. So why was that? Why did we assume that it would help us build our capacity and it didn't? So this is a great tool. You know, feel free to use that URL to learn more, but this is a great tool about, you know, to help us plan our campaigns and also evaluate the different tactics within that campaign. And then just a note here about, I guess it's really about power and about changing society, the note that I want to make here. Often when we are, you know, making change within kind of like civil society and NGOs, we're using what we call symbiotic change. We're largely using like the levers that the system gives us, you know, petitions, lobbying, you know, using even protests, even using social media and that kind of stuff. This is what we call symbiotic change. It's making change within the system based on the system's terms, trying to persuade leaders to do something, for example. But there are other kinds of change as well that I just kind of want to discuss very, very quickly. We won't get in depth about it. One is called ruptural change, and this is basically not working within the system, but destroying the system or damaging the system. It's change that you know, undermines or subverts the system itself. It's change that puts a threat to those in power. And then we have change that happens outside of the system or parallel to the system, or offers us an alternative to what the system offers. So one example of this would be from Tindouf, which is a refugee community in southwestern Algeria, where Sahrawis under occupation have been forced to flee and set up their lives. So in this refugee camp, you know, the women basically run everything. You know, the schools, they have their own parliamentary system. It's a society where they've built a lot of even internet infrastructure in the middle of a very hot desert. And so, you know, they've kind of found their way to make change outside of the system. They don't have a government that serves them, so they kind of created their own, right? So this is what we call interstitial change. The words are not so important, but the concept that that basically, you know, there is a system and we can work within it, we can work outside of it, or we can try to resist it and change it, destroy and or change it. So these are kind of 3 ways that change works. And in our campaigning, whether it's digital advocacy or not, we can think about these ways of making change as overlapping with one another. So how do we get the best from each in order to get us where we want to go? Just switch back here. And so here we have arrived. We want to give enough time for some question and answer, and then we want to have some kind of plenary session where we can discuss some of the themes that have arisen today. So I will ask Helen to share a few questions with me that have come up. And if you haven't typed any to the chat up to this point, please do so. It would be really great to hear what questions you have.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much for that presentation. There are no questions yet in the chat, just people sharing. During the session, we asked them to hold something, and Bridget said she was holding a pen and it symbolizes the power of spoken and written campaigns. And Tatiana said she was holding a portable Bluetooth speaker and it symbolizes the fact that digital advocacy amplifies our voices. And Nyasha said, I'm holding a green flower, connotatively symbolizing hope for the females and happy moments ahead of us. Very nice contributions there. But no questions yet.
Great. I have a question for all of you as you feel free to share any questions that you have in the chat. I don't know, do we have the capacity for some folks to also raise hands? Do we want to do it that way? Julie asks, I can see that when we talked of hoax, is it constitutionally allowable? Can it lead to court cases? Well, it depends on your particular context, Julie. I'm not sure about Kenya specifically. In many countries, it is questionable in the eyes of the law, or debatable. The particular story that I shared about where the two gentlemen represented, did the hoax to represent Dow Chemical. They have been sued. Later on, the cases were dropped. But they have faced kind of like legal repercussions, even in a fairly democratic context. So with all of these tactics that we've shared, there are varying kinds of risks. Sometimes those are legal risks. Sometimes we're talking about police brutality. Sometimes we're talking about digital security risks, economic risks, right? So I think what we're trying to share here is that just to get us to think outside the box about the spectrum of tools that's available for us. And then particularly with a hoax, sometimes you can do it in ways that are very obvious, and just kind of making fun of maybe like a bad actor, right? A bad politician, somebody that has wronged the people. There have always been those scenarios, where people kind of like dress up as somebody that they don't like, and then they go into a particular meeting or a space or in the media, and it's very obvious that it's not the real person, but they're just sort of comedically, acting as though they are that person. So there are many ways to pull off hoaxes. I don't see any other questions. Do we want to go ahead to have more of an open plenary? Sean says, let's say that you're talking about female empowerment in a very patriarchal environment where male supremacy is supported by religion and culture. Can you appeal to another value? Yes, the point is female emancipation, but can you appeal to kindness, for example, as a value for your campaign? That's a great, great question, and I almost wanted to talk about it more in the course of the session. Sometimes it does make sense to appeal to values that many people hold, and sometimes it makes sense to appeal to values that a minority of people hold. I can use the example of, let's just look at LGBT plus rights. In the United States, for example, saying LGBT rights are human rights, that didn't really work so effectively as a campaign sort of messaging, framing strategy. But when Ellen DeGeneres came out, a popular celebrity icon, that pop culture kind of aspect brought more public support for LGBT plus rights. And there was also that strategic reframing of this is a campaign about love. It's not about rights anymore. That's not the language we're using, even though it is sort of about rights, but it's not the language we're using. It's about love, it's about people who love each other and allowing them to be together. So appealing to that value of love is something that can resonate with so many people. And then on the other hand, sometimes, what you're trying to show with your action is that you actually side with maybe an ostracized minority group. And maybe you're actually just appealing to a small base that you want to invite others who think like you to demonstrate their solidarity with that particular group, even though it may not be the popular thing. So the real question about values is like thinking, who do we want to move with this action, and what are their values? That's the real question to ask. Great. I'm glad to see so many questions coming in. Helen, is there any that you would like to pose here, or even speak to, perhaps?
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. There's one from Sifa. Hi, I'm Sifa in Rwanda. I want to ask you how digital advocacy can be promoted to people who do not have any kind of platform.
Yeah, that's a great question, Sifa. I would say that you don't have to. What are their platforms? What are their social networks? They may not be on Facebook. They may not have even a smartphone, but they still have social networks. They still have people in their communities that they influence, right? Social networks are not a new thing. It's just that we now have these kind of digital platforms for them. The example that I used earlier in the session about the radio campaign, perhaps if radio is a medium in your community, then you don't need to get everybody to be using WhatsApp in order to reach them. You can, if they're listening to the radio, maybe that's like your go-to way of connecting with them.
Okay. And then Bridget asks, I like what you said about don't do anything, threaten to do something. However, can you threaten anonymously if what you advocate for threatens lives?
I don't want to make any assumptions, Bridget, about what you have in mind. But yes, it is possible to pose a threat anonymously. It has been done. But the question is that strategic? Is that effective? I'm obviously not advocating for, like I would suggest that we abide by the do no harm principle. However, I think it could be, quite useful in some very specific situations, but that's a question that you'll have to ask with you and your comrades.
Okay, and then Julie asks, you mentioned something on signatures. How does it work as a form of activism?
Yeah, I think, Julie, are you referring to petitions where we are collecting signatures for a particular cause? If that's the case, I would offer a few thoughts about petitions, both for and against, I could say. Obviously, petitions are a way that we are allowed in many countries to use to raise our voice. So it operates in that sort of symbiotic change within the system kind of tactical framework. However, there are many communities. I can think of an indigenous community in Eastern Uganda that has been doing petitions for generation after generation, and it hasn't even helped them, even in a small way, to get their land back, really. So you can also waste a lot of time, energy, and resources collecting signatures when the person receiving those signatures can just kind of crumble up the paper and throw it in the waste bin, if they have the power to do that, right? So the question is, like, what is your petition, or what are your signatures intending to do? And who is your target? And will that a petition actually move that target? This is the same question Africa Youth Movement asked. Are all of these signatures really going to influence al-Bashir? Well, maybe not, but if we target like African heads of state who have diplomatic influence with al-Bashir, then perhaps, maybe, yes, maybe we can influence the state of Sudan. So, really asking those kind of strategic questions before you decide, let's just start a petition. And then the other thing I would say about petitions is find a creative way to deliver them. So if you have 1,000 signatures, that may not sound like so many, but if you write down the names on, I don't know, like maybe if you get charcoal and you write them on a glass like this, and each glass has somebody's signature on it, and you put water in the glass, then you're talking about a campaign for access to water, and you deliver all those glasses of water on the back of a truck, to your local government, then perhaps, they're going to listen. It's quite creative. It grabs attention. It tells a story, right? So the way in which you deliver the signatures in the petition can also be, creatively influenced. Any other question that you want to highlight here, Helen?
I keep talking on mute, I'm so sorry. So Sean asks, is it okay to be controversial in your campaign? Maybe raise attention towards your campaign, and it's related to what Charlene has shared. Is it okay to use bias and lies in order to attract more people so that they grasp the idea behind what you're advocating for?
What we're trying to do here today is share a lot of controversial ideas so that you can consider maybe how they might influence your own campaigning. So you are going to have to ask all of those questions. Controversy serves a very strong purpose sometimes. You know, it gets people talking, right? It helps center issues that have been marginal or invisible. It's not always helpful. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So with all of these examples that we have shared, you know, these are just examples. We're not asking you to go and replicate. We are sharing them as examples so that we can consider how they might influence our own strategizing.
Okay, this was a great presentation. My question relates to Stella Nyanzi's form of advocacy, specifically her, I don't know how to pronounce that, derobing or something. Will going to such extremist measures to have your views heard, not expose one to abuse or make one more vulnerable in society, especially if you're a young activist? How do you protect yourself in a way that doesn't dilute the level of your passion?
I love this question. I love this question, Tatiana. Yes, definitely. Stella, even though she has, you know, more privilege as an academic and, you know, than perhaps other women, and, you know, she might be a generation older than many of us are, you know, so she has like some degree of protection. Still, she was abused, very much abused. And she had to calculate that for herself and ask, am I prepared to, you know, endure the potential consequences? And so that's a question that individuals must be able to make, to ask themselves before they take an action. What I, you know, I've been working with groups, campaigning and, you know, doing organizing for a long time and all that kind of thing. And I think my principle or my ethos around this is like, don't force people to do an action. You can invite people to do an action, but you want to have like very sincere conversations about, here are the possible outcomes. You know, here's what the repression might look like. Have we prepared for scenario A, B, C, D? Police are going to come. They might do this thing. Are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for the propaganda? You know, so, you know, really sitting with yourself and with others that you might be doing something with and asking some of these questions beforehand. And especially, you know, how are we prepared? Do we have enough solidarity to keep supporting ourselves? In Uganda, one thing that we did is, because we kept having these situations where people get arrested, then everything gets thrown into chaos until they get released. And so, you know, we found that it wasn't strategic. We kept being thrown into this chaos with every arrest, with every abuse. And we weren't actually able to be on offense. We were always on defense. So we said, okay, why don't we develop some groups that can be just for jail solidarity, so that those who go to jail, there's a way to welcome people into the movement where they don't need to take any other risk apart from cooking lunch for anybody that gets detained. And then there's a group that maybe delivers the lunch, says a prayer with them, brings a toothbrush, keeps their morale high, right? So you want to have many points of entry within your organizations, campaigns, movements. You want people to be able to participate in a variety of ways that feel comfortable to them. And, you know, some people may not have the privilege to endure all the kinds of abuse that might be meted out against them. You know, we had so many single mothers in one campaign that I was a part of, and they kept saying, you know, we have our children at home. What happens if I get arrested? So the obvious logic was like, let's not, you know, make these people the front lines people that are put in harm's way. There are other ways that they can contribute. So we don't want to say that every way of contributing is like equally impactful in every situation, but we do want to say, you know, create every possible point of entry to build your base wider and wider so that you can have the risk takers, you can have the people that need to stay safe, and everybody in between. And I've found that, even in my own life, that, doing that first kind of, risky action gives courage to take it a step higher next time. And then you do the next one, then you're like, wow, that was like really interesting. Like, and actually I can bear like the outcomes of it. So let me now try this next thing, So, we want people to feel somewhat comfortable, but there's also that level of, discomfort that provokes people to grow and get more courage as well.
Okay, Sean appreciates the presentation. Yes, we will avail the session recording and presentation to Plan, who will share it with you. And then Adventia, hi, I would like to know what we can do for other girls who have not conditions to get on digital platforms so that they can participate on the sessions. I think this was also answered when you answered about the social networks and the radios. Okay, and then from Calvin, how long should a good campaign take?
There is no formula, Calvin, for how long a good campaign should take. Sometimes campaigns take decades, other times they take less than a week. It depends what you're trying to achieve, the scale at which you're achieving it. Is it, local, global? There are some local campaigns that can take many, many years as well. And then there are some global campaigns that won't take as long. So it really, really depends on the particulars of what you're trying to achieve.
That's it from the questions so far. Phil, thank you so much.
Sure, it's been great to be here with you all, and we still have just a few minutes, 7 minutes left. Helen, how would you like to use that time?
Maybe just invite us if there's anything else we would like to share so that we can share in the plenary. In the meantime, we have shared our social media platform links and names. You can join us using those. If there's anything we want to share, you're free to share.
Helen, we can see a question here that as an advocate, what can go wrong using digital advocacy that can easily be avoided?
Wow, it's a big question. Many things can go wrong, but I think more things can go right than can go wrong. And often when you're just starting out at the early part of maybe a digital campaign, the risks are not as high. If you make a post that very few people see and it doesn't make any influence, the only thing that you've wasted is 30 seconds of your time crafting that content, right? So I really encourage us to start with the safe ways of creating content, circulating it, building up a community that wants to work together on a campaign. Some of that building of a foundation is really important. You don't want to go into a digital campaign alone. The whole point is that you're calling people in to your advocacy efforts. So it's great, I think, to get connected with others. If you're an organization, you don't want to throw all the responsibility into a department. I've worked with several organizations that have somebody that they call their social media manager. That might be great to have that person, but it's not enough. You're going to need all of your membership, your networks to be involved. It's not like QuickBooks in the accounting department where you can just sort of outsource it to 1 or 2 people because it's that niche skill. When we're talking about advocacy, we're talking about building our power together. And so, just sort of siphoning off a department is one mistake that I've seen that isn't so helpful, especially at with sort of NGO style digital advocacy. You know, so building a team, I think, is like one of the best ways to answer that question. You want to be building a team. Is there any other question or comment that we would like to highlight before we say thank you?
I guess that's it from our end. I don't know if there are any more questions, but we really appreciate your time, Advocacy Accelerator team, and for coming through to give us such an insightful session. And we are looking forward to engaging you further. I can see that you've given us your build power together. Exactly, Bridget. Thank you so much. We are ensuring that that happens. I can see Tatiana still has a question. As one is carrying out digital advocacy, one's campaign may grow so large it becomes difficult to trace or manage. How then can one protect his or her campaign so that it doesn't get distorted in the long run?
Yeah, there are many things that we didn't discuss today about digital advocacy, and one of them is that the digital terrain is so volatile, and you cannot always control the messaging. You know, and then there's also the question of, is it strategic for you to control the messaging? Sometimes that is not helpful. Sometimes you actually want to have many perspectives and voices that are building off of the messaging. There was a question in a recent session that we had where somebody said, can we use these trending, you know, campaigns like the, Helen, what was the group, the Stingy Men's Association?
Yeah.
You know, can we jump on one of these, you know, trending kind of groups and like start talking about gender justice, for example? Sure, you can. And also people will jump on yours and co-opt them and take the message away from you as well. And that's what's kind of fun, but also volatile about digital advocacy. And we don't have any more time. I just want to appreciate everybody that's participated. I would have loved to be in a physical room with all of you and learn more about your struggles, your campaigns, your art, your work. So feel free to get in touch with me. I've shared my email in the chat if you'd like to share more about yourselves. I'd be most appreciative for that. So thank you on behalf of Advocacy Accelerator. We're really appreciative of the convening and all of you who have participated. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Thank you so much. And thank you to the young delegates who have done such an amazing work and, you know, being engaged. I just want to get a feel of, if you want to continue learning more about digital advocacy, if you want, type 1 in the chat box. Type 1 so that we can organize more sessions with Phil and his team and Helen. Type 1 in the chat box so that we can see. Yeah, oh, great. We need to, if we get to 10, then we'll have a session. If we don't get to 10, we don't have a session. Phil told me he needs 10 people minimum in a session. Is that correct? Good.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Yeah, I can see quite a number. So I should be reaching out to the team on email, and then we can organize a session where we go deeper and have it even in a longer term kind of arrangement with Advocacy Accelerator. So thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I'm just going to now hand it over to Tando, who will take over, then we close off. Tando, you can now take over.
Okay, thank you so much, Elsie. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Hi.
Great to see you again today. So it's been a lovely 3 days. So I'm just here with a very short task. And the short task is, where are we going to from here? So I want to hear from you guys. Are there any actions from the past 3 days? Day one, we were looking at the civic space and looking at how we can be opening up the civic space and airing out our voices and carrying out our advocacy in a better environment. Day two, we're looking at activism. And day three, today, we were looking at the digital advocacy aspect. So what do we want to do from here? Where do we go to from here? So I just want to hear from you. Are there any actions? Are there any thoughts that are coming into mind about things that you want to implement after the 2021 edition of the Africa Youth Festival? So please type on the chat box. I need at least 3 actions that we are going to be coming with from here on. So as they are typing the 3 actions, Elsie, can I please share my screen?
Yes, one moment, please. Yeah, now you can.
Thank you. Okay, how do we then take action? And I'm sure that the chat box is filling up with actions that we want to take from here. I'm sure people have ideas of things that they want to do. It could be art activities, it could be digital activities, it could be anything at all pushing the gender justice movement. But then how do we take action? First, we need to clearly define, what do you want to do? And after that, why do you want to do it? How are you going to do it? With who are you going to do it with? The allies that we were just learning about just now. And what help do you need from Plan International as you're doing it? And when are you going to be done? And how will you be presenting the results from your action? So I want us to also keep those in mind and also type our actions in the chat box. All right, I see that some of the actions are coming through. So with the actions that are coming through, I want to challenge you guys to actually develop your actions further, give them flesh using these questions that are on the board right now. And using these questions that are on the board, I want us to develop our actions further so that we can follow up on them and ensure that we do something after this Africa Youth Festival. So I'm seeing Julie is saying that they want to try a virtual campaign using GPX on a topic. Well, okay, I think this was a question to the previous session. Nilton is saying more knowledge on using civic space in this pandemic situation. And Tatiana is saying we can try hosting a virtual festival with a mutual advocacy campaign at heart. So I want us to think a little bit finer, think a little bit deeper, and think about all the issues that we were talking about as we were having this festival. I'm sure issues to do with child marriages came up. Issues to do with unemployment came out very loudly. Gender injustices, gender-based violence, and a whole lot of other issues. We discussed them along the way. And just now in this previous session that we had as well, there is a lot of other issues that we discussed as well. So I want us to think deeper about that and think about the challenges that we have in our communities and try to sort out some action from this Africa Youth Festival and actually be able to present something to our local plan offices that we are going to be doing as a result of us participating in this year's Africa Youth Festival. So yeah, a short film. I'm seeing that live Zoom performances, art components of the festival. Those are some of the ideas that we have. So I'm going to challenge you to go and build up further on those plans, present them to your local plan offices so that we can be working on something as we are moving throughout the year 2021 into the next Africa Youth Festival that you might have in the year 2022. And also keep in mind that you should be answering some of these questions as you are developing your action plan. So I'm seeing my actions coming in the chat box, Elsie. I think let's just let them keep coming as you prepare to close. Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Thank you so
I'm
much.
seeing quite interesting ideas. Like Sean is saying that he wants to deal with period poverty through poetry, prose, and play. So you see, Sean has gone a bit deeper. I'd encourage Julie. Julie, you gave an idea of having a virtual campaign. What topics would you speak to? Yeah, what topics would you speak to? Nilton needs more knowledge on civic space. Yeah, that we can also avail. Tatiana and Julie, already we are seeing some form of joint agreement rather, where Tatiana is also saying we can try host a virtual festival with a mutual advocacy campaign at heart. So Tatiana, just to task you further, what topic do you think we should be tackling? Yeah.
And I'm also seeing a comment from Jacqueline in the chat box, and she's saying that she wants to do a bit more on gender equality, and she would need a little bit more advice on how to go about it.
Okay. Okay, great. Systemic oppression maybe. Okay, Tatiana, we get that. Julie, what did you have in mind? We now have two aspects. Sean says period poverty. Tatiana is talking about systemic oppression. Phil is saying here's a little big global project that may be relevant, the climate clockwork. Oh, great. We will also check on that so that we can work on, climate justice. Yes, we have one component that's big on that in our work. Any more comments? So as you think through, so for example, okay, that's fine. But what is important to you, Julie? What is important? So as Jacqueline is thinking, Jacqueline, think what is important to you as an individual? What do you think you'd like us to tackle? What's the biggest struggle? Like Nolote would speak to ending child marriage. Is it something that will still resonate with the team? Yeah, we could think through those. Is climate justice something that resonates with all of us? Is period poverty one aspect that we think is key? Now we already have a few topics that we'd like to talk to. Tatiana, just to put you to task, what do you mean by systemic oppression? Systematic oppression. Yeah, you can unmute and talk to it. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
All right. It's really an umbrella term, so it can encompass a lot of things. Maybe issues to do with gender, even climate justice, poverty. It's just speaking against institutionalizing oppression, whereby the dominant members of the society are further weakening those that aren't privileged in society. So we can touch on poverty, maybe menstrual health, we can touch on climate, we can touch on gender issues, anything to do with people, basically, like dominant people oppressing less dominant people.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. I can see lots of comments. Will also says repression against artists. Yes, most of the young people here are either engaged in artistic forms of advocacy or are interested in going in that direction. So I think that's also a good place to start. I can see unemployment is one issue, equal rights to people with disability, capacitating teenage mothers with financial literacy and entrepreneurial skills. Okay, great. A virtual all Africa's parliament to discuss issues facing youth in Africa, such as poverty and how to deal with such challenge. GPS location, AU headquarters. Awesome. I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah. That's exciting. Yeah. Tando, have I left out something?
No? Yes, I think there's just one message that might have been sent directly. Sifa. Sifa is also saying that she really wants to mobilize around gender issues. I think that's in Rwanda. Right.
Okay, Sean, I think your creative juices are flowing. More and more ideas here that are coming through. But as we said, it's important to focus on one to start off, then we can do the rest as we go. So if you've not given in your ideas, I encourage you to do that. You can email me directly. I think you all have my email address, and just tell me the 3 points. Exactly. Yes, we are quite enthusiastic, Phil, and we're looking forward to growing this revolution. Okay, I can see more and more comments coming in, but our time is already fast spent. What we will do is this: drop me an email or request your Plan Country office to just drop me an email of the requests that you have, and we will move forward. But the first thing that you're going to do is engage in a deeper discussion on digital advocacy. Do we all agree about that? Yeah? What do you think about that? That we can get more skills, build our capacity on digital advocacy, yeah? Yeah. Thanks, Julie, I can see. Yes. Okay, great. Absolutely. We are now a virtual world, and it's important for us to engage in the same. So right now, I just want us to do a quick field check, so to speak, that would tell us how your day was, and not only your day, but how you feel the festival was, and then we just get to understand which topics were really big and which ones did you enjoy most. So here I am going to launch a poll, get in your responses, and then we can review afterwards. So which session did you like the most? Which session do you feel that you resonate with the most? It's a good place to know so that we can plan more and more of these sessions. Yeah, go ahead and do the poll. Yeah, great, okay. Two more minutes, just 2 more minutes, then we proceed. Okay, 1 more minute. If you've not already polled, give your responses. 1 more minute. Okay, great. So here we are ending the poll. Okay, thanks. I can see what sessions you enjoyed the most. I probably won't share this for now so that we can proceed. Okay, thank you. Now on to the next question. We just have 3 questions. We're asking, what would you like to learn more about? Let me know, what would you like to learn more about? You can select 2 or 3. What aspects would you like to learn more about? Thank you for those responses. One more question and we are done. Now, so, as we're asking, are you confident on how you will now be able to take action with the information you got? Are you confident? Yeah, okay, let's proceed, continue. We just have a few more minutes before we log off. Thank you, people. Thank you so much for the responses. We can see that you're confident in proceeding and that you would like to take more action. And actually right now you proceed with action as you move into your different countries. At this point, I just want to say thank you for taking your time to be with us. Again, we want to put on our cameras so that we can take a photo. Put on your camera, yes, so that we can all take a photo. Yes, on. The ones who stayed on to the last. Everybody, put on your cameras. Everybody, let's smile. Precious. Smile, everybody. And then, as usual, Viva Africa. 1, 2, 3, go.
Viva Africa!
Viva Africa!
Viva Africa!
Viva Africa!
Depois não estou a ver.
Yay! So from all of us, we are so appreciative of you taking time to join us. From our regional director, Roger Yates, he passes on his greatest and love to all of you, saying thank you for joining in. Thank you for making time. And this is not the end of our engagement. As you've seen, you've already asked for more training on digital advocacy on the different aspects. That is what we're going to pursue. From now, if you have any questions, anything that you're challenged with, please reach out to me. I'm willing to support you. And if you feel like you need more training at country level, we're also willing to support you. So don't feel like you're stranded on your own. That's it from us.
Hi, bye guys. It's been amazing. I love your zeal. I love your energy. You guys will go far. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Obrigado.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye. Asante. Merci. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.